The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, thank you for joining us and welcome to this Make UK webinar in partnership with She Software. I'm Jenny and I will be your moderator for the day. We've got a great session for you this morning where we'll be looking at how technology and data can transform health and safety management. This is the first webinar that we're delivering as part of our new partnership with She Software. The partnership brings together Make UK's expertise in health and safety with She Software's market-leading health and safety software solution, Assure. There's some exciting new solutions and services on the way, and I'll talk a little bit more about those at the end of the webinar. But before we start, I'll just draw your attention to a couple of points. Firstly, we are recording this webinar, and so we will be making it available to you and sent it to you via link. Throughout the session, we have some polling questions. It'd be great to get your input on. When you see the voting questions on your screen, you simply select and submit your answer. There's quite a lot of us on the line today. We've allocated some time at the end for questions. If you do have a question, you can submit that at any time by using the chat box, and we'll put them to the expert at the end of the Q&A. I'm delighted now to introduce our presenters. Julian Taylor, who is Head of Solutions Architects at She Software. Julian manages a team across the UK who work closely with organisations to map out their issues, challenges and objectives and to identify how technology can support. He's passionate about engaging and empowering the broader teams within the organisations to make safety happen and simply be part of what we do. We also have Chris Newsom with us today. Chris is a qualified mechanical engineer and a chartered fellow of the Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. Chris is Make UK's lead for health, safety and sustainability product development and delivery. Chris also works with IOSH to assess members' suitability for chartership. I'm now pleased to hand over to Chris to start the session.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. So what I wanted to, and welcome everyone to the webinar. What I wanted to just touch on first of all was to talk about common health and safety challenges that we all face and how technology and digitisation can really help us with that. And this is a lot of the area that we're looking at the moment. So to put things in perspective, Make UK consultants do hundreds of consultancy visits to lots of different clients every year. But the three common themes that come back from all of those visits are on the screen now that you can see. The first one it touches on is engagement. And so what we mean by that is engaging at the very top level of the organisation with senior management. So, you know, managing directors, CEOs, getting them to fully engage in health and safety and be involved and see it as a priority. And also at the higher risk machine operator, people actually doing the higher risk work and getting them to engage and see why it's important to them. The second point on there is the closeout of actions. I'm sure everyone on the webinar can relate to one of the biggest problems we have. We spend a lot of time and a lot of effort, a lot of money sometimes doing audits, doing inspections, having consultancy visits. If we don't close out the actions that they generate, we're not really improving, we're not really moving forward. It's not uncommon for Make UK consultants to go into organisations and find out that the audit they did 6 months ago, the inspection they did 6 months ago, the actions generated have not been closed out, haven't even been looked at. So we'll really get into on this webinar how digitisation can help with that. And the final thing is about consistency and compliance with management systems. So what I'm talking about here is, you know, what forms should we be using? What's the best practice form that's out there? How do we make sure everyone does the same thing? How do we make sure everyone complies with what we've got? So those are the three challenges. There are many, but those are the three consistent priority ones that we see in all our interactions with organisations. Julian, would you agree with those points?
I think there are 3 points that we come across, excuse me, all the time, Chris. And the top one to me is the holy grail. If we don't engage with the people, I think particularly at the sharp end within our organisation, so the machine operators that you've just described, What that means is that we commonly have a poor flow of information because they don't talk about the things that they see whilst they're doing their jobs. And that information could be really, really proactive and supportive for us in terms of improving our performance. We also see, again, commonly, for various reasons, a real inefficiency around the closeout of actions, which exposes an organisation to potentially injuring people or litigation. And then the third point, which is just, again, this lack of consistency. So we go to multiple sites within the same organisation and everybody's doing it differently, which means that we're not all doing it in the best possible manner. So it'll be really interesting to talk through that this morning.
Okay, thanks, Julian. I'll hand back over to Jenny now for our first poll of the webinar.
Thanks, Chris. Yes, so for our first poll this morning, we would like you to tell us what is your biggest challenge when managing health and safety. Is it employee engagement, manager engagement, action management, clarity on being compliant, or none of the above? I'll just give a few more minutes so that people can complete their responses. That's great, thank you. Right, so let's take a look at what the results are. So interesting, way out in the lead is manager engagement with 38%. Just behind that is 28% is employee engagement, and then 15% action management, 13% clarity on being compliant, and 5% in none of the above. Chris, is that the kind of response you would expect?
Yeah, absolutely. The two bits around engagement at the top are, they're number one on the list. And it's interesting to see that people almost equally share between employee engagement and manager engagement. You've got to get engagement at both ends of the spectrum in order to affect any change. And it's, we say that all the time, but it's good to know that people agree, and this is what people are seeing in real life. And I think it's very interesting what we're going to talk about this morning, because we've got real tools that sort of demonstrate how the sort of new way of doing things around digitisation can help us with those two issues. So yeah, totally in line with what we were thinking. So that's good. Julian, could you sort of talk about how maybe Assure can help with this?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing we wanted to talk about, Chris, was really just to, I suppose, clarify again more about why we have these issues. So I want to paint a bit of a picture for you this morning, and I'm going to start off with the classic HEINRICHs triangle. This is a model that's been around for many years now. Some people have tried to debunk it. Some people have tried to evolve it over time. That's probably a discussion for another day, but I think some of the sort of underlying principles of HEINRICH still absolutely apply to what we're trying to achieve, and particularly around this engagement piece. So if we think about the triangle, and I've deliberately left the numbers off today so we don't get into that discussion, but if we think about the things particularly at the bottom of the triangle, commonly, if we know about those things, we can start to mitigate against incidents happening in the first place. But because of this lack of engagement that we've described with managers and also with our employees, we don't find out about the unsafe acts or the unsafe conditions. We don't find out about the near misses because people don't feel that they have to report those things, or systems stop them from reporting things. If I draw a bit of a picture of a typical organisation as well, that'll highlight again why we struggle with this. And what we commonly see is that if we go into an organisation, somebody who's responsible for health and safety, so a health and safety manager, and that person is illustrated as the yellow figure at the top of the screen here. They might work with a small team. And one thing we hear all the time is that actually you never see too many health and safety people. Commonly, it tends to be a small team in relation to the size of the organisation. That team may sit within a department, and that department which is commonly something like HR, may sit within the head office of the organisation. If we then start to look outside of the head office, we might have regions. So in this case, we're looking at a global organisation with Europe, USA and Asia Pac. But equally, it could be a UK organisation with regions across the United Kingdom. When we get out to the regions, we might then have locations or sites. And when we get into the sites, we might break down into disciplines, teams or departments. We've not even started to think about people yet. So there we have people who are tied to a discipline, and also we might have lone workers, remote workers. So we might have maintenance engineers, installation engineers. There's a long list of people who go out and work remotely from any location on a daily basis. But if we start to paint this picture, what this perfectly illustrates is something that we've termed organisational complexity. And organisational complexity starts to explain why we struggle with these things that we've talked about. So if you think about that team at the top, trying to create a relationship with the people at the bottom through this maze, actually that becomes very challenging. It also becomes very challenging to get a good flow of information going between the different areas of the organisation and the compliance team. And it's difficult to create this culture of safety across all of these different areas of the organisation. And if we then reflect back to our triangle that we were talking about a moment ago, actually what we commonly see is that actually we've got this situation where, because of that lack of engagement, that lack of understanding, actually we don't get to know about the important stuff at the bottom of the triangle, and we find organisations who work in a very reactive manner, and they purely manage incidents that have already occurred. So that's one of the things that we want to look at this morning, is how we can change that through the use of technology.
Okay, thanks, Julian. So yeah, we've all seen this triangle or variations on it before, but it is absolutely real, and it's the challenge that we're talking about here. How do we? One of the issues certainly is, how do we understand the stuff that we can't see, the near misses, the hazards? It is, as you said, the holy grail. Very simply, if we can identify those, properly action them, we close out, we don't have actions, and that's really where we want to concentrate the effort. A lot of organisations, historically, the effort's concentrated at the top of the triangle. So how can technology and looking at things digitally help us with that, Julian?
Well, I think some of it's very simple, actually, Chris. Is if we reflect on the way a lot of organisations currently work, there's a lack of investment around health and safety and around health and safety systems. So what we find are people still using pieces of paper. And in fact, I've got an example on my desk in front of me, which was given to me very recently, which is a near miss reporting card. So it's a yellow card which needs to be filled in with a pen. Now, if you think about that in the real world, in a manufacturing organisation, somebody maybe has to go and find that card or locate that card on the shop floor. They have to then fill it out. They then have to go and take it and submit it somewhere, or put it in a box somewhere, and then somebody needs to come and empty the box on a regular basis. But actually, that's just a clunky, old-fashioned system. Now, how does that resonate with our people who are used to a modern mobile world? And if I ask the question to everybody who's on the webinar this morning, do you have a smartphone with you? I'm pretty sure 99% of you are going to put your hand up and say yes. And that's the world, that's the culture that our people are experiencing and are used to, and they expect business systems to reflect that. Now, if you compare what I've just described with the opportunity to maybe pull a phone out of your pocket, hit a mobile app, and then be able to report a hazard simply and easily on a mobile app and hit submit, actually we're just more likely to engage with people, and it's going to resonate with people if we do it in that manner.
Okay, so can I pass back over to you, Jenny, for the next poll then, please?
Yes, thanks, Chris. So for our second poll this morning, we would like to know, in your opinion, would the facility to report hazards via a mobile app result in increased hazard reporting? just give a couple of seconds so the people can submit their answers. That's great. Thank you. So, interesting split here, Julian. So 56% think yes, it will increase hazard reporting. 16% don't think it will. 28% not sure. So indicating that maybe there's some other factors affecting in the background there. Is that what you'd expect to see?
It's I suppose it's a how long's a piece of string, Jenny, in terms of what you'd expect to see. It'd be interesting to have a conversation with the people who to understand the reasons why they think it wouldn't. I think it's good to reflect on sort of our experiences in terms of putting a system into organisations. Really nice example is a large care organisation that we deal with, and we put the system into place. Particularly, they looked at it for things like near miss and incident reporting, and their figures, they went up 70% in terms of the number of reported near misses that they got in a 6-month period. So absolutely, every time we put the system in, we see this big uplift in terms of reporting. And I think just pragmatically, most health and safety professionals would accept that most organisations suffer from an underreporting of these things, because unless somebody's been physically hurt, actually it can be quite easy not to tell people about things if actually it's complicated or difficult to do it.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that as well. So we've got not sure at 28%. I mean, I think that's quite realistic. If you've never tried to use a mobile app to do it, we don't know whether it's going to make a difference or not. I think what we do know is the easier you make it for people to report things, the more likely they are to do it. It's a very simplistic thing to say, but it is true. I think we'd all agree. And going away from paper systems and making it something which probably you've got in your pocket, and it's electronic and it's instant, I think is only going to help, and it removes those barriers that you're talking about there. So the interesting thing, I think, when you get the data, then is, can you see it? What does it look like? Because that's really what's going to make people report more. So, Julian, could you sort of talk about how the system looks at the data? What happens to the data once it's reported?
Okay, well, let's run through in 2 stages, Chris. So I think, first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my mobile phone onto the screen and just very quickly show you how this can work. So this is my mobile phone, so you can start to see some of the apps that I use. But if I go to Assure Go, which is the health and safety mobile app at the top there, and click onto there, very simply fires up. What it will do is link into the software system that you're using as an organization, and you can tailor a list of forms to appear on here. So if we take hazard reporting as a theme, if I then click on hazard reporting, very simple and easy, takes me in, gives me a form. The form can link into an organization structure, so I can say whereabouts in the organization this has occurred. So I'm going to say it's in the Northeast. We can then have some guidance notes in here to guide people through the completion of the form. We can make it simple and easy for somebody to complete the form. At the top, you can see that we also have images, so I can add pictures from a camera roll, or I can take photographs. So again, we get great supporting information actually at the point of something happening or a hazard occurring. Simple and easy to be able to collate the information, fill out the form, and then submit it. Now, once the form has been submitted, what it will do is it will go into a database. And if we think about some of the things that we've already talked about this morning, what it will do is it will notify people. So it will engage with those managers who we're struggling for engagement with. It will tell them that hazard's been reported, and it will prompt the next steps. Really importantly, though, what it does as well is it goes into a dashboard, so it visualizes things. So for our senior leaders, for our supervisors, for our managers, even for our employees, we can visualize the information and we can start to see what's happening and the trends that we've got across the organization. And if we can see that information, we can start to then manage things more effectively. So for example, on the left-hand side here, I can see hazards by type. So I can start to see the trends that we've got, and I can see where, as a compliance professional, I need to focus my efforts and focus my coaching and education. The other great part about the dashboards is that they're easy to drill into. So we can start to introduce some competition around this. So we can have league tables, and in typical management style, we can promote people who are doing well, but also we can identify where people aren't engaged, and again we can go and coach and educate those people. So again, the technology gives us the insights to be able to help to engage people. So where it says hazards by org unit there, actually if I go into there and go to recent, I can drill into name, and it will show me exactly where in the organization hazards have been reported. So I can see which of my teams are engaging with safety. If I want to click on any element in a chart, it will then filter the overall dashboard. So if I've got 30% of fire hazards, that's my largest sector. If I click on that, it refreshes the whole dashboard, and it's showing me where those fire hazards have then been reported. And I can keep going here. I could right click on that and drill into, or I could go and see actually who's reported those. So bear with me for 2 seconds. I can go recent, and I can go reported by, and it will tell me who's reported these fire hazards. So I can see in granular detail what's happening and use that information to then proactively manage across the system or manage across the organization. If I scroll on down to the bottom, it even links to the individual records. So again, if I want to go and see the detail of what's been reported before I have a conversation with this person, it makes it very easy to do that. So we drive a better flow of information through the use of a mobile app, and then we visualize that information in a way that allows us to manage safety far more effectively.
Okay, again, it looks great, Julian. How quick, if I'm reporting a hazard, how quick before it's on that dashboard, before we can all see it?
So it flows straight into the system. At the moment, it runs 24 hours behind, but that will soon be running with live real-time information. But it's simple and easy. And I suppose a couple of other key things around this, Chris, is that if we think about our world at the moment, if we have to create management reports through Excel spreadsheets, that takes a massive amount of time that we could be using far more proactively and to do better things around compliance and around health and safety. And also we tend to share those reports maybe on a monthly basis, which means people talk about safety on a monthly basis. So the idea here is that we can share these dashboards with our senior leaders, with our supervisors and managers, and even have them on sort of screens within the workplace for our sort of employees at the sharp end. But it means that we're putting good safety information out there all the time to encourage more regular conversations.
Fantastic. And I think anyone on the call here, whether you're a health and safety manager or a MD of an organisation, we all know how much time health and safety practitioners spend generating reports. You know, it's an Excel spreadsheet or something else. And the question is, do you really see that as value adding? Some organisations might do. I don't think it is. It's just getting data and putting it into some format people can understand. The system you've just demonstrated there completely removes the need to do that. There's no intervention from the health and safety manager required. The information is reported and it's immediately visible to whoever you want it to be. And as you said, maybe supervisors, certainly the MD, the CEO. As we know, there are new management standards coming into place or in place in some organisations that really demand that to happen. So I think that makes a huge improvement there. So thank you, Julian. So I'm just starting to talk about the new management standard there, 45001, which I would imagine everyone on the call has heard of. If we can just give some context, just to check everyone understands where we are with 45001. If you have OSAS 18001 today, which a lot of organisations do, either you have to be a first tier supplier into a big organisation, or you have to because you think it's the right thing to do. you have to swap from 18,001 to 45 by 2021. So you have to make that transition. There isn't no other choice other than to not be accredited anymore. So that's where we're all moving to. And even if you're not 18,001 accredited today, this is just good management system practice. And I thought it was just useful to look at some of the things that are in Clause 5. Clause 5 is something that didn't exist in the old standard. And it's really interesting, I think, to see how this relates to some of the digital assistance that we're talking about here. So Clause 5 asks really important words at the top of the screen there. We're talking about top management. We're not talking about the health and safety manager. This is the CEO, the MD of that organisation, the top management. And they need to be able to demonstrate the things that it's listed there. And perhaps the most important is that they're taking overall responsibility. Traditionally, that has been, okay, I've got a health and safety policy and I've signed it and it's on the wall. To be accredited to 45,001, that's not going to be acceptable anymore. The word is demonstrate. You need to demonstrate how you are pushing health and safety forward, how you're helping the management system achieve its objectives. It talks here about developing, promoting a culture, and then finally ensuring continual improvement. And you might say, well, what's the link between the two things? The link between the two things is you can now, as the very top manager in the organisation, see the data. The auditor comes in, perhaps, and asks you how your accident performance is going on. I think traditionally, maybe most people would have had to do some preparation there, but you know it now because you look at it every day because it's in the system. So I think it really, the digitisation really helps with demonstrating how you meet the first bits of Clause 5. The second bits of Clause 5 that are again very important, it talks about here directing and supporting persons to contribute to effectiveness of the management system. There's lots of positive things there about helping people develop and associated issues, but there's also a bit around how quickly are we closing out actions? You know, if we've got actions open for 6 months plus, what are we doing about it? Are we speaking to the people that have those actions? Are we trying to solve the reasons that are there? This is the expectation on top management going forward. It's not the expectation just on the health and safety professional. So some of the reasons why actions don't get closed out, I think, are around, you know, people didn't know we had the action, all sorts of different reasons. You know, we're too busy, whatever it might be, but this system we have removes a lot of those barriers that are there. So if I can pass back to Jenny for our next poll, and maybe it will demonstrate this point.
Thanks, Chris. Yes, so for our third and final poll this morning, we would like to know, in your view, what the main reasons are that actions don't get closed. And this one, you can select more than one answer. So people are too busy, ineffective and or disjointed systems. There's a lack of visibility and monitoring of those actions, or none of the above. Again, just wait a couple of moments so everybody can have an opportunity to contribute. That's great. Thank you very much. So we'll take a look at the results, Chris. So out in front, 59% think that it is because people are too busy. Next up in with 51%, it's a lack of visibility or monitoring of actions. And then at 39% is the as a result of ineffective and or disjointed systems, and 12% said none of the above. So it'd be interesting to know what that 12% thought it was. Is that, broadly speaking, what you'd expect?
Yeah, it is. It's difficult to predict how polls are going to go for lots of obvious reasons. But I think when we looked at this third question here, we almost expected an equal spread because it depends on, you know, what you do in your organisation. It's interesting that none of them are sort of low, if you like. They're all common issues that everyone has. So if I could just talk about a couple of them and just reflect back on some of the stuff we've said already. The top one there, people are too busy, 59%. Well, what we're suggesting by making the system more digital is that we take away a lot of the non-value adding work that people are doing. That might be the health and safety manager producing lots of reports. It might be the machine operator, getting a 3-page near miss document they've got to fill in and trying to find it and see where it is. So everything we're talking about here, I think, removes a lot of, the too busy reason. And clearly people are still going to be very busy. That's just how we are, I think. But we're removing a lot of the obstacles that are here. So people are too busy. I think we're addressing that in some way with this system. Julian, what do you think about the other two that are there?
Yeah, I think actually they tend to join up as well, some of these, Chris. So actually people being too busy actually aligns to ineffective systems, because actually if it takes me a lot of time to be able to find and to manage actions, actually it deters me from actually carrying out the exercise again. So it becomes a challenge to get things closed out. And again, if you think about action management, Chris, it's just a fundamental to good safety. So regardless of 45,001, everything we do around health and safety has outputs. So whether it's an incident investigation where we have corrective actions, an audit or an inspection where we have a non-conformance, even a risk assessment where we have additional control measures that we're looking to implement, all of those activities have outputs. So it's absolutely critical that we actually make sure that people are able to efficiently close those things out, and again be able to demonstrate good compliance to regulatory bodies or to auditors who are going to come on site.
Okay, yeah. Can you demonstrate some of that stuff for us as well and show us, does the system help with action management?
Absolutely. I think first of all, Chris, is that when I log into the system, first of all, it puts my actions and my activities in front of me. So here you can see that I've got this area called My Tasks. It's got the things that I need to be doing, and I can manage those from the front screen. So it's simple and easy for me to be able to actually physically sort of see things and to be able to deal with them. One of the biggest mistakes people make, and this is where this technology can help, is that they split actions out into a separate system from the activity. So a good example might be that we go to site, we do a paper audit, we then go back to the workplace and we put that maybe onto an Excel spreadsheet, and we email the actions out to people using email. So inherently, by splitting those things out, it makes it harder for us to be able to see the actions relating to the audit and to manage those. And again, using email means that they're not going to be chased up. The idea of the system is that when I go to my list of audits in the system, what it will do is it will show me my list of audits. And what we can see is that we've got an icon which is the star next to every audit. So as I go down this list of audits, I can see how many actions I've got, and the color tells me the worst case scenario of any one of those actions. So if we go to record reference number 9, I've got 5 actions. I know at least one of them is overdue straight away. And all I do is click on the star, and then I can see all of those actions in one place relating to that particular audit. Now, the system will chase and police these actions through to completion. So if I raise a new action in the system, just to show you how you do that, so bear with me a second. Yorkshire Wi-Fi is just playing up here. So what will happen is that the actions will, when I create an action, there we go. So what it will allow me to do is I can tie it to a specific element within the record. So if it's an audit, for example, I can tie it to the question. We've got some simple fields around the title and the description. We've got a category field that looks really simple, but it's a really important part of this, because what this does is gives us a list of categories, and these are configurable by you as an organization. So if I classify this as a non-conformance, what it means is I'm going to be able to run those dashboards that we saw earlier and say, for example, show me any actions relating to non-conformance that are overdue by user. And it just makes the management of these things very much easier. So senior leaders can be managing teams and supervisors who are either closing actions out well or not well. So we can be promoting good behavior coaching around poor behaviour. We can send an action to either an individual or to multiple people. So if we take a scenario of a hazard, we'll carry on that theme. A hazard's been spotted at one location, and actually we think actually this could occur across all of our locations. I can send an action to each one of my supervisors at the different locations to go and investigate. So it means that we can get things done in bulk. It means every one of those supervisors then needs to close that action out, and I'll then have that proof that again I can reflect back to auditors or to regulatory bodies. It captures information like the date raised. It will always retain the original due date, so again we can measure performance simply and easily. And additionally at the bottom there we can attach supporting documents. So if I'm asking somebody, for example, to do a toolbox talk, I can attach a copy of the toolbox talk to the action. Now, when I hit save and close, what it will do is it will send an email to the recipient or recipients of the action, and it will, in the attachments to the email, have the attachment that I've made here. As soon as I hit save and close, the clock starts ticking. So the technology will chase up and it will prompt and remind people when that action is due for completion. If it goes overdue, it will escalate it to their line management and also back to the person who raised the action initially. And upon completion, it requires a quality check. It needs an approval. So again, all of those stages can be reflected in and visualized in dashboards, which just gives, again, our management teams a really powerful tool to ensure that we don't have actions that are overdue by 6 months, which actually then expose us to potentially hurting people or to some kind of litigation. I was sorry, Chris, just to finish off with, just centrally as well, we also have an area called Action Manager. So as well as looking at actions that are tied to specific records, I can also look at all of my actions across the whole organization, and I can run reports or filter those actions to look at them by type. So for example, the example I gave earlier of non-conformances that are overdue, I can go in and simply and easily find those things. So I'm not wasting time doing it. It's an easy process.
Fantastic. Thanks, Julian. The last point I just wanted to touch on is a common question that we always get asked. Very simple, around, you know, what form should I use for this? What form should I use for that? What's the enforcement agency looking for? What's legally compliant, etc. And we spend a lot of time getting our bank of forms and sending them to people, when really what we want to be doing is adding value around our expert knowledge and consultancy skills. And so one of the things the system does, and the unique bit around our partnership, is it contains a lot of best practice forms. I wonder, Julian, if you could just demonstrate one, just a sort of brief view of it, just to finish off, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so we have directives and legislation around manual handling. So as an example, if I go into our modules and go to risk, manual handling is a form of risk assessment. So we're going to go down to our manual handling assessments. And in here, we have a form we have standard forms, but we can add to those and configure those. So Chris and our project manager have done some great work in here and have sort of honed and created a manual handling assessment. So a couple of things here. So first of all, we talked earlier about this consistency and best practice. So rather than people using different manual handling assessments across different sites in your organization, they have one form that they use. So we do things in a consistent way, and we do those in a best format approach. But we can also make these forms dynamic, so they're simple and easy to complete. So for example, if we think about a manual handling assessment, if I scroll down through here, we've got at the top here, we've got a task assessment, and it's currently looking at pushing and pulling. Now, that's been triggered because I've selected the assessment type. If I remove the assessment type from there and we save, we go back up to the top, you'll see it's now removed those sections, because what it's asking me to do is, as I go through, it's going to tailor the form based upon the responses I give. So if I was doing this afresh, I'd go through, I'd put in my load weight and start to look at the sort of the type of lift that I'm doing. But down the bottom, when I select the assessment type, if I go to lifting and carrying, for example, you can see in the top right-hand corner, it's telling me now I've got new sections to complete. And when I go to the sections tab, it's changed the sections that I've got. But it makes it a very simple and easy form to complete. And if we think about everything that we've talked about so far today, it starts to tie everything together. So you can see underneath, we've got the ability to add an action against each question. So as I go through this manual handling assessment, if I realize that there are any sort of extra controls that I need to put into place, I can add those in here and now. And as we've just seen, those will get policed through to completion. But I can demonstrate compliance simply and easily to the people who need to see that. And again, all of these responses are tailored by you. So the style, the way that it can be done is tailored by you. But again, that's really important, because when we think about that engagement piece, we want this to reflect your approach, your terminology, and your style. So when somebody logs into the system, it's intuitive and it just makes sense to them. So that's just one example of many forms.
Brilliant.
I suppose one final thing there, Chris, just to finish off with, again, is that by having a system that comes pre-populated with some examples and with best practice forms, again, it's a massive time saver, because if you have to start from scratch in creating those forms, that takes quite a lot of resource and a lot of time to be able to do it.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks, Julian. And the example there is one that's driven really a lot by legislation and guidance, and you recognise some of the titles that are there. But because of the unique relationship we've got, we've been able to build things around, for example, machinery risk assessment, CE marking, and those standard forms just don't exist. So, these are encapsulated within the system as well. So it's a real good blend of different skills. Okay, so if I can pass back over to Jenny now, just to see if we've got any questions.
Thanks. Yes, thanks, Chris. We do have some questions coming in. We don't have a lot of time left, but if you do have any more questions, you just pop them into the chat box, and we'll see how many we can get through. Before we get into the questions as such, just to take us way back to, I think it was the first poll, and there was a couple of comments coming in around how giving employees the ability to report their hazards through a mobile app, and how that would help increase the volume of hazards being reported. A lot of the feedback has been that the employees aren't allowed to use phones on the factory floor, or they don't have a business phone and they won't want to use a personal phone to be doing, adding a business app to it. Julian, are there some challenges that you've met in the past when you've been rolling out the software?
I fully expected this one, Jenny. So it's good that it's come up. So obviously we have experienced this. Some organisations allow people to have the app on a personal phone. Other people provide business tools to be able to do it. What a lot of manufacturing organisations have done is actually created sort of areas where they might have, for example, a tablet that's in a case. So people can go to that point to use the mobile app to submit information. Other people have tablets that they then allow people to take out onto the shop floor to do things like inspections using the mobile app. So there are ways that you can get around these situations. And again, it's around considering your organisation and what works effectively for you. And it's about having that flexible approach.
Good, thank you. It's a question that is along a similar line is the access to an internet connection, and whether the app works if it's not connected to the internet.
Okay, another great question, because again, in a lot of particularly manufacturing organisations, if you've got a large sort of manufacturing sort of shop floor, there might be sort of dead spots or areas where there isn't Wi-Fi, so the app does work offline.
Great, thanks, Julian. A few questions have came in asking about costs, ballpark figures. I think that is purely dependent on the size of the company that you have. If you are interested in finding out more, in the survey at the end of the webinar, there is a checkbox to say that you'd like to talk to us and indicate the size of your company, and at that point we can have that conversation and give you an idea of the price, or certainly the range of costs that might be involved for you. And the final question is, we're running out of time, so the final question would be, how long does it take to roll out such a system like this?
I'm going to give the classic answer, which is how long is a piece of string, Jenny. Again, it depends on sort of the scope of the project, but a good sort of rule of thumb is probably a 3-month period from sort of the signing of contracts to potentially going live with sort of a first stage of an implementation. But again, that does vary based upon, as I say, what people are looking to achieve. Some of it can be rolled out sort of very quickly, very easily. So if somebody wanted to do something sort of simple in the first instance, like hazard reporting, the record is we've done that in sort of a 3-week period. But again, we'd talk to you about what you were looking for and give you some sort of better idea based upon your requirements on a one-to-one basis.
Great, thank you for. Do you want to add to that, Chris?
Yeah, sorry. So Make UK ourselves are implementing the software within our own organisation, and nearly completed, and that's taken us. It will take us about 3 months by the time we've completed it. The implementation process is easy, really. You know, there's someone from the organisation that works with you every step of the way. I haven't asked one question, can we do this, where the answer's been no. Those are just my questions, I suppose. But it's a really, the process is as easy as it can be, and as Julian said, totally achievable, depending on the size of your company, obviously, within a 3-month period.
Thanks, Chris. Right, I think that brings today's session to a close. I hope it's been valuable for you. As mentioned, and as I think has been quite clear throughout the conversation this morning, Make UK and She Software have joined forces, and it is an exciting new partnership. It brings the likes of Chris and Make UK's experts with the market-leading software that you've just had a look into there this morning, and together we're kind of combining those services and support to develop a new way of managing health and safety. We already have a solution for larger organisations and those with higher risk profiles. We are working on a version of the software for small and medium-sized businesses and those with lower risks. This is a really unique solution that is intended to overcome some of the challenges that small business often faces when implementing such sophisticated software as this, such as the cost, the time, and other challenges like that. So if you'd like to know more about the partnership, as I mentioned, you can let us know in the survey at the end of the webinar, and we will be in touch. Just to also let you know, we have some events coming up. So Make UK have some events that you might be interested in on managing ill health, tackling absence and promoting wellbeing. These seminars are running throughout the country throughout June. You can find out more on our website at makeuk.org/training. Any of you are attending the expo next week, you can pop along and see She Software at SH3060. Julian's also speaking at the event, so you can go and hear him speak at the Safety Technology Zone at 3:10, and he's on there with the people from HS2 as well for an interesting conversation there. And finally, you can keep up to date with Make UK, She Software, news on the partnership by connecting with us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and of course by visiting both or either of our websites. Once again, thank you for joining us this morning. The recording of the webinar will be circulated in the next day or so. If you have any further questions, please feel free to contact Chris or Julian directly. We hope to see you again soon.